Hi everybody, this is Mrs. Wilson. It is December 1st, 2020, and we are continuing with Unit 3, Unrest and Rebellion. Our Learn It for today is I Can Identify the Founding Fathers of Patriot Heroes, including John Adams, Samuel Adams, Benjamin Franklin, Nathan Hale, Thomas Jefferson, the Sons of Liberty, and George Washington, and their motivations and contributions during the Revolutionary period. Our essential question is, what motivates people to make a change? And what I would like to add to this is that the Founding Fathers, who, by the way, were not called Founding Fathers in that day and age, that's not a title given to them until about 1916, almost, about 140 years after the Declaration of Independence is signed. But things that motivated them to change were so compelling that it inspired others living in colonies throughout the world to do the same thing and follow in their footsteps and fight for freedom, fight for independence against their mother countries such as Great Britain, France, Spain, and so forth. And so the events that shaped the creation and founding of the United States as an independent nation will have a domino effect on colonies throughout the world who will do the exact same thing. So let's get started looking at the Founding Fathers and Patriot Heroes of the Revolution, American Revolution. On your note page, you will be filling in the missing information, which is highlighted in this presentation in red. Beginning with John Adams. John Adams was chosen as part of the committee to create the Declaration of Independence and helped edit the final draft. He assisted in negotiating the Paris Peace Treaty with the British, which ended the American Revolution in 1783. The Declaration of Independence, just like the persuasive letter you're going to be writing this week, was written in multiple drafts. John Adams was one of three people that helped, that contributed to the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin being the other two. And John Adams helped to edit that final draft before it was finally signed. He's also known not only for being the second president of the United States and the first president to live in the White House, but he was a prolific writer. He wrote thousands of letters that are well documented in history, and also believed that the new president should be called His Majesty, because the title president simply wasn't, in his opinion, powerful enough to kind of rise to the level of importance that titles like kings and queens had. And so, of course, that his opinion to call George Washington His Majesty was not accepted, because the last thing our founding fathers wanted was to call somebody the same kind of title, the same kind of refer to them the same way that King George was referred to, and that was that was what they were trying to break away from. Sam Adams, his second cousin, helped create the Sons of Liberty and the Committees of Correspondence, whose purpose was to share news among the colonies. And so what the Committees of Correspondence would do is simply ride from town to town to alert others of news and happenings that were going on in the colonies. After all, this is a day and age that doesn't include the internet or Twitter or social media or cell phones or anything of that nature. And so the best way to get the word out was to put somebody on horseback and send them trotting along from community to community to get the word out of especially of the important things that are going on, and to help keep communities connected. He's also famous for spreading the slogan, "No taxation without representation," which became a rallying cry during this day and age. If you recall, many of the protests that were inspired by the Stamp Act and the Tea Act and the Intolerable Acts were done so because colonists had no representation in British Parliament when those laws were made. And it wasn't that they were opposed to paying taxes, for example. It's just they were opposed to the idea that there was nobody there speaking on their behalf from the 13 colonies. So Samuel Adams, famous for no taxation without representation and creating the Sons of Liberty. Patrick Henry spoke out against Great Britain and the Stamp Act in the House of Burgesses, which, if you recall, was our first representative government created in Jamestown in 1619. And a representative government is when people elect their leaders. They vote for their leaders. And that's the type of government we have today. He is most famous for his speech that ended with, "Give me liberty or give me death," as he tried to convince Virginians why what was happening to people in Boston, Massachusetts, several hundred miles away, could very easily happen to Virginians, and that it wasn't just a fight for Boston, but rather it was it was necessary for all the colonies to come together in defense of liberty, in defense of freedom. George Washington, our first president, was chosen to lead the volunteer army at the Second Continental Congress. At Valley Forge during the American Revolution, and we'll talk about that next week when we looked at key battles, he taught officers how to train their own soldiers, and as a result, the soldiers' improved skills turned them into a serious fighting force. After all, we do not have an army to speak of until the American Revolution. So you're seeing really the formation of our military at this time, with the Continental Army made up of all volunteers. We also have the creation of our Navy during this time as well. George Washington, although had some difficulties as a general, and was an incredible general, he was even a better spy master. He employed the efforts of men and women, women disguised as men, to act as spies, to get important information out to the rank and file in the fields that were fighting, and to let the leaders, the officers leading the rank and file in the field know about troop movements of the British Army and what their plans were and so forth. So he was an excellent general, but he was even a more incredible spy master. He was also somebody that really liked to look good. And you see a lot of photos of our founding fathers and people living in this day and age, that had powdered wigs, that wore powdered wigs. And he was not one of those people. He actually just simply powdered his own hair and had it styled every morning. He believed in looking good, and whether he was on top of his white stallion or whether he was at home. And that's what he did. He was also somebody that seemed to defy death during war. At least twice his horse was shot out from underneath him, and multiple times bullets went through his uniform, went through his shoulder pads, and so forth. And never once, though, did a bullet graze him. And those that fought directly under him were just in awe of his ability to escape death, and really took that as a sign that he was a special, that he was being saved for something more special. And it was very inspiring to those around him, especially during times that were difficult, when many were considering possibly deserting the military and going home. Paul Revere was a patriot who made a famous ride warning the colonists of the British attack. And we're all familiar with the saying, "The British are coming, the British are coming." Reportedly, though, he more likely said something along the lines of, "The regulars are coming, the regulars are coming." But nonetheless, he rode from Lexington to Concord to alert the people that the British were coming, and to be on their guard. He also helped unite colonies with his Boston Massacre engraving, depicting the British troops as firing upon supposedly innocent Boston patriots that were simply minding their own business in the Boston Common, Boston Square, when in fact it's more likely they were, as we know from the past, were throwing snowballs and rocks and so forth at the British troops, and were anything but innocent in that particular incident. But nonetheless, Paul Revere, famous not only for the Boston Massacre engraving and his famous ride, but also for being a very talented silversmith, making lots of things out of silver, as well as being a dentist and being very skilled at creating false teeth out of ivory. Thomas Paine wrote Common Sense, and you watched a Liberty Kids episode about that yesterday, as well as read an article about Thomas Paine. He was from Great Britain. He was not born and raised in the colonies, but rather a truly British citizen living in London, England, who was inspired by the happenings in the colonies and decided to join the cause. And he did so by writing a pamphlet that encouraged the colonies to fight for independence from Great Britain. He explained reasons for independence in plain language that common people could understand, and that was very important in that day and age, because not everybody was as educated as Thomas Paine and Thomas Jefferson and others, and so they needed things to, if you wanted to get them to rally on your side, you needed to persuade them in such a way that made sense to them, and made fighting and possibly dying for a cause worthwhile. Thomas Jefferson was the main author of the Declaration of Independence, in which he announced the colonies were forming an independent nation. He also included the phrase unalienable rights, which means these rights are given to us by God and can only be taken away from God. We are born with these rights, including the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Like John Adams, he was a prolific writer of letters and other things. And also like John Adams, he died the same day as John Adams on the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence on July 4th, 1826. Nathan Hale was part of George Washington's spy ring. He was a 21-year-old teacher and captain in the Connecticut Regiment. He volunteered to spy on the British in New York City. He was not very good at it and was captured, and is famous for his this quote that he said shortly before being hung for treason, and that was, "I only regret that I have but one life to lose for my country." Benjamin Franklin also served on the Second Continental Congress and helped to write the Declaration of Independence. He gained, in addition to helping write the Declaration of Independence, he helped gain French aid during the war. Were it not for the support of the French, a former enemy of ours in the French and Indian War, were it not for the support of the French, it's very likely that we would not have been able to defeat Britain during the American Revolution. So his support was, or his ability to persuade the French to come to our aid was absolutely instrumental in helping defeat and really motivate our patriots, our colony, our Continental Army that was by the time the French had joined the army or had joined the war, were pretty were pretty beat up. They had suffered a lot of losses, and so they needed a shot in the arm, so to speak, and the French were there to help do that, especially after after the colonists had defeated the British during the Battle of Saratoga. He was also influential in negotiating the Treaty of Paris, which helped to end the war in the American Revolution in 1783. So after going through this presentation and filling in your notes, which you can use to complete a matching exercise in Schoology, or if you wish to challenge yourself to see if you can complete the matching exercise in a Schoology assessment to see how well you can match the Founding Father with a brief description of what they did or how they contributed to the American Revolution. If you choose to do it without notes, you will have 3 chances to get a perfect score. Good luck, and I hope you enjoy the presentation. See you next time.